My notion of human well-being is really open-ended. I don't think we understand what the horizon is, if in fact there is one, for kind of ultimate flourishing of conscious minds. We have a pretty good sense of what we don't want and are right not to want. We don't want to be terrorized and depressed. The generic situation we want to find ourselves in more and more is to effortlessly cooperate with creative and happy strangers, right? I mean, there's 7 billion of us. We need institutions and laws and norms and ways of thinking that take the friction out of pleasurable and non-paranoid interaction with strangers. It's not just about having 5 or so close friends who have your back, right? I mean, clearly we're all on the same team on some basic level. And if we can't figure out how to build a civilization where everyone thrives to some degree, we'll have the world we currently have. We're in a situation now where I think it's reasonable to worry that our default state of partisanship and tribalism and rational fear of the incompatible aims of other groups and other people is unsustainable in the presence of more and more destructive technology. I think we have to get our act together psychologically and socially in a way that we haven't yet. Philanthropy is, when it's telescopic in this way, when you're just signing a check, you're not necessarily connected to the good you're doing. And I can imagine someone doing immense good in the world by signing very large checks, but not actually internalizing the gratification of that. At some level, we have to be aware of the possibility of rowing in 2 boats simultaneously. Is what the effects are in the world of how we're living. So we want to have a good impact on others, but we actually want our conscious states of psychological pain and pleasure to be mapped in some rational way to the kinds of effects we're having. Having our beliefs map onto reality to some degree is obviously good, because if they're not, you're just bumping into hard objects. If your map is completely wrong, you are bound to suffer, right? So we have to be in a situation where radical ignorance can't be bliss. It may be useful to have a slightly delusional, self-serving bias, right? To think you're coming off better than you are. It may give you more enthusiasm for your life, more confidence. That's one principle. So I think we want our beliefs to be true in some basic sense. And therefore, we want to be open to new evidence and better arguments perpetually. If you close yourself off, if you say, well, listen, I'm done thinking about reality, and I know what's true, then again, when more data comes in, when something's surprising, when one of your intuitions proves to be faulty, if you can't error correct, again, you're just going to fall out of alignment with what's going on in the world and with what other people think is true. So really the only mechanism we have to do that is human conversation. We have to be open to having other people point out errors in our thinking. And in the conversation we have with ourselves, we have to do likewise. We have to be continually open to the possibility that we might be wrong, and in fact, we're very likely to be wrong a lot of the time. And so then hence the virtue of getting educated and surrounding yourself with smart people and reading good books and just exposing yourself to the kinds of lessons that other people have learned over thousands of years and are learning in real time. Most of what people care about can be thought of as a skill, right? I mean, well-being is a skill. Not suffering unnecessarily is a skill. Regulating, noticing your emotional life and regulating negative emotion is a skill. So, I have a meditation app, and meditation is a skill. It's a very useful one, and I'm spending a lot of time teaching what's now referred to as mindfulness meditation. And the moment you begin practicing mindfulness, which is just learning to pay close attention to the nature of your experience. You're not adding anything to your experience. You're just noticing what it's like to be you moment to moment, but in a way that is not reactive. You're not grasping at what's pleasant or pushing what's unpleasant away. Let's say you have a fear of public speaking, right? So you're about to go out on stage and you feel anxiety. The the default state of someone who doesn't want to have that experience is to try to figure, is one, to, in advance worry about that experience. I mean, the anxiety is kindled just by the mere thought of what you have to do. Then, once you feel the butterflies, you are at war with them. I mean, first you can notice that anxiety isn't even that unpleasant. I mean, it's so close to excitement in its actual physiology that really the difference between excitement and anxiety is more or less just the framing. It's just the story you're telling yourself. If you felt these tingles and this slightly adrenalized response right before you're about to go on a roller coaster, that's part of why you're going on the roller coaster. You like that experience, right? But the fact that you feel that way when you're about to have an interview or you're about to walk out on stage, that's intolerable. The sense of self for most of us is not a feeling that we're identical with our bodies. Most people don't feel identical with their physical bodies. They feel like they're passengers inside their bodies. Right? They're like, my body's down here, like these are my hands, these are my legs. I obviously care about these things. These are where my pains and pleasures are coming from. But I'm up here in the head. So much of what we're thinking is making us miserable, right? So much of it is unpleasant. So much of it is causing anxiety. You look at your to-do list. You got 50 things on it. You just feel like, oh my, the day's not long enough. This is the state we're in, and the obverse of that is when we're really just connecting with life in a joyful, creative, beautiful way. Like when you look out the window and it's the most beautiful sunset ever, and you are just looking at the sunset, right? You're fully connected with its beauty. Those are all moments where you're losing this sense of self. You're not really aware of losing the sense of self in those moments. You're not really aware of what is freeing about those moments, and you can't do it in other circumstances. What's happening for people, most people, is that they're waiting for the world to give them a good enough reason to just be present, and to be present so fully that they lose their sense of self, right? That they're no longer behind their face, just waiting for something good to happen, right? Or figuring out how to change the experience enough so that, again, they can stop. They're no longer at war. I mean, we're to a greater or lesser degree, we're always at war. I mean, we're always fighting something. There's always this you're always noticing something wrong. You're feeling uncomfortable in your body. You're reacting to something that somebody did or you thought they did. The moments where you really feel good are moments where there isn't a coming to rest, right? Where it's not about the past or future. It's not about half a second ago, and it's not about half a second from now. And the ultimate version of that is entails the dropping of this sense of self. For me, flourishing is a matter of spending your time pleasantly and happily and creatively. Every moment when someone asks you, well, that last hour, that last day, that last week, that last year, do you feel good about that? Was that a good use of your time? That remembering self, that retrospective gesture, that's where people worry about things like meaning. And the remembering self is the self that you're talking to when you say, are you satisfied with your life? Whether you're asking yourself or someone's asking you. The answers that are available in those moments really determine whether or not somebody has a kind of global life satisfaction, whether they have meaning. But the experiencing self, the self that is just going moment to moment, feeling pains and pleasure, and just dealing with this very short, time horizon. I think that's fundamentally our real self. The use of negative imagination, where you think of all of the bad things that haven't happened to you. Right? So if you're just, if you're stuck in traffic, driving to the job that you don't like, and you're frustrated, you can think of all the things that could happen to you, right, that haven't. And if any one of them happened to you, you would consider your prayers answered if you could just be returned to this moment. right? Like you haven't been diagnosed with cancer, right? You've got two young kids, say, you want to live to see them grow up, and you could be the guy who today is going to find out you've got 2 months to live. That's just more thinking, but it can have a profound effect. You can reframe your experience in a way that doesn't actually change anything material about your circumstance, and it can let the light in.
I think the fear is uncertainty. I think that's the reason why there is a billion-dollar industry now teaching people how to become more present. And the irony is if we would have been able to live in the present 100,000 years ago in the savannas of Africa, we would have gotten eaten by the lion that we didn't see coming. Living in the present is not evolutionarily advantageous. You know what's advantageous is the fact that we can imagine future scenarios. The reason we have memory, and Jordan Peterson talks about this, is not so we can relish about past times, is so that we can learn from things that happened in the past and make inferences about what's going to happen. Mitigating against future risk was biologically selected for. Those who did that bred more widely. And so we have inherited that brilliant neuroses of foreshadowing future danger and mitigating against it. Problem is, once we've made the world safe, we still are like a hamster in a hamster wheel. It's like you may have money, you may be paying your rent, you maybe have a wife and a kid and this and that, but you're still worried about tomorrow. Like, what's gonna happen? Oh my God, the collapse of the government, a terrorist attack, an airplane disaster. Like, that's the wire. Ironically, we've gotten to a time where now some of the hardware that has served us so well is now problematic, and there's this desire to return to a kind of capacity to be here now and actually like neuter our foreshadowing capacity and a relishing of memory. To block the signals forwards and backwards. In fact, in mental health now, there is a renaissance. Again, I'm talking about like the rise of learning to be in the present, meditation, mindfulness. All of these techniques are teaching us to neutralize our wiring to think about the future. The human brain, human beings are like an artificial intelligence program. We take in data from the present. We compare that data with data from the past, and we use that then to make predictions about the future. And that's what we're always doing automatically all the time. In fact, a lot of the time, we dispense with the present data altogether and just leapfrog to the conclusion. And so we're living in this perpetual been there's and seen that's of the adult mind, also known as jadedness. You're not even there. You're like, rather look at your phone, or you're rather, what movie we're gonna watch later. Like, we're just never present. Because our brain is so effective at saying, I know what this is, and making predictions about the future. And if the future's not dangerous, then we don't even have to pay attention to what's happening right now. So we live with this kind of perpetual low-level hum of anxiety. This future tense, like we're like crooked, like having a crooked back. We're like future tense all the time. Never now, always future tense, you know? And maybe that makes you a good businessman or a good planner. But unless you're like an architect and you're like planning the structure you're gonna build, like the incapacity to enjoy and smell the flowers is very problematic. What are some of the ways that we can neuter our compulsion to constantly leapfrog to the future? Travel, experiences that violate your expectation. Art, what these things do is they block all signals forwards and backwards. It's hard to know what's about to happen if you're in a place that's completely new. When you're off the reservation, you don't know where that path leads. And when you don't know where that path leads, it's hard to imagine where it leads. So instead, your senses are heightened and you're here now paying attention. And it also answers this dilemma of our existential conundrum of what to do about death. Because it's not even that we're afraid of dying tomorrow. We're afraid of dying in 30 years. Like, I'm afraid of turning 90 and dying when I'm 90. Except when I'm traveling, when I'm exposed to great, beautiful art, when I'm making love, what happens is you block all signals forwards and backwards. When you block all signals forwards and backwards, you enter the flow of the present. A present that is literally wonder-full. Wonder being the byproduct of exactly that unencumbered sense of first sight or virginal noticing. So you're obliterating the adult capacity to foreshadow everything. And you're returning to a more virginal state of heightened appreciation for what's unfolding in real time. And that seems to be the answer to our ills. Because when we have those experiences, we have awe. And awe is an experience of such perceptual expansion in the moment that all your mental models about what this is are fucking obliterated. Oh, now I know what a glacier looks like. Oh, that's what a lion looks like in its natural habitat. Like you are dumbstruck, you are awestruck. Even though these are transitory experiences, they leave afterglows. That's why when people take magic mushrooms and have a mystical experience, or when they go to the Grand Canyon or they see their child be born, they're left with this afterglow for weeks, months, sometimes even years afterwards, of increased well-being, increased creativity, and increased compassion for other people. Perhaps the answer to the existential agitation of what to do with ourselves in the face of death is simply to stop and smell the roses, to learn to steward the contents of consciousness to the here and now. When we get caught up in like the excessive rumination and overthinking, to not get caught up in routine or patterns of thinking. By exposing ourselves to great art, to travel, to do things new and different. Or you know, you're hurled back into the flow of the now.
And the reality is that when we study honesty, it's not just about honesty, it's about how we trade different human values with each other. And we have to trade them all the time. And what we find in general is that we don't always trade them in our long-term best interests. And often we succumb to temptation, and our trade-off is more influenced by what we can rationalize than what is actually good for us. The easiest ones are, of course, overeating, undersaving, not exercising, and you know, you look like a very fit person, so you probably don't indulge too much. But how much do you sleep? Right? You ask people these questions. When in the last month have you overeaten, underexercised, not saved enough, didn't sleep enough, not always wash your hands when you left the bathroom? You go ahead and
you'll find something.
And there's lots of things that we do that is irrational. And you know, in standard economics, there's this term revealed preferences. We say, what do people want? Let's just see how they behave. And the way they behave means what they want. But if you look at how people behave, it's inconsistent.
Okay.
With what we really want. So the reality is that, and this maybe has been one of the biggest findings in social science the last 40 years, over and over, that the environment matters. The environment matters. You take a person and you put them in one environment, they behave one way. You take the same person, you put them in a different environment, they behave very differently. If I walk you up every morning to a buffet of donuts and muffins and croissants and the smell filling your home, you'll be a different person at the end of the year, right? Now, I'm not saying you'll fail every day, but you'll be a different person. So the environment matters, and the thing about it is that it's kind of both good and bad. On the good side, it means that we actually have power, that there's a power of human free will But the power is not in resisting the cookie, it's not to expose ourselves to it from the beginning. Right? Our power is to design our environment in a different way. Right? If I came and tempted you all the time, life wouldn't be good. But if you redesign your environment, you could live much better. So look at your offices here, right? You design them with a very specific idea in mind. Once you design them in mind, other things follow, right? If you design them very differently, other things would follow. So human freedom really resides in designing our environment. So that's the good side. The bad side is that we often let other entities design our environment. Think about supermarket. Supermarket is not something that you and I design for our own purposes. Somebody else designed it for their purposes. That's right. And they put different things at eye level, and they put different things at the end of the aisle, and they put different things when you check out, and somebody has a very different goal. And their goal, by the way, is not your long-term well-being. Right? So on one hand, we have power by designing our environment. On the other hand, often somebody else has this power, and therefore they can manipulate us.